This is a stunning game between Magnus and look at this game. Here black castles. What are we gonna do? We're gonna give the Greek gift. Do you know what it is? It's sacrificing the bishop on h7. Black takes back. Then we bring in the knight. We hop on forward. And now the king has to come forward. If it goes back, then we come in with our queen. And this is a devastating attack. So black comes forward with the king. Then we bring in the h-pawn. Because the king doesn't have a lot of squares left. Only this square. Black tries to sacrifice the knight. We just leave it hanging. Here black played the move f5. And this enables us to give a very nice en passant checkmate with h5. The king goes to h6. Do you see the checkmate in 2? Check. Black could have played f4, ruining our party. Because then we had a checkmate here. Instead, black played the move g5. And there's a en passant checkmate here with the h-pawn. Because we give a check with the bishop and the rook. En passant. En passant. En passant. Then this game. Black is already winning. Look how vulnerable this rook is. And after the move h4, black exploited the weak rook with the move b5. The rook simply doesn't have any squares to go to. So it's stuck. Instead, it tries to get the exchange from it. But of course, we do not take with the bishop. Because then I would take back. But we have a better move here. Namely, bringing our queen into the game. And now if we would take, then we keep the bishop. White decides to move away the queen. The rook is lost anyway. We bring up the king. Because if we wouldn't, and if we would have taken here, then there's a check here. Very important. And white would be back into the game because the king and the queen are hanging. So we have to move our queen in between. So we move up our king. And the rook is still lost over here. Cannot go anywhere. So it has to take back. And now we just simply bring in our pieces. That's what we do. The bishop, we reroute. There's nothing white can do. There it goes. Now we bring in the queen to this square. This is dead lost. Now we give a check over here. The king goes to the side of the board and we give a check on d1. King goes here. We threaten to give checkmate here. There's no way to defend it basically. Because the king is stuck, the queen cannot help. So white decides to push the f-pawn and we take it with an en passant. And this is a checkmate. Bonjour, it's en passant. En passant. And now there's this beautiful queen sack. Knight to g5. If you take, then you have a check on e6. King has to come forward and you keep the knight because the king cannot attack it. So it goes back. You give a check. King goes forward and you can simply take the bishop. So instead, black played the queen to a5. Now we can take the bishop and we're up a piece, but this one hangs, right? And if you take back, then the queen comes in with a check. And here white saw everything in advance already. So white decided to sacrifice not one, but 2 rooks with bishop to d2. So he had so much faith in his attack. If you take the rook, then we slide forward, you take the other rook, and now we come in with the queen, threatening checkmate. You take the pawn with a check, king comes forward, and here the best move would have been, and this is a difficult move, king to g7, because if you give a check here, you can escape through h6, and after f5, you slide the king forward, a nice king march, because remember, you already took 2 rooks. Instead, black made a move and played knight to h6. And this is a forced checkmate. In 3, check, king comes forward. And this is a check along the diagonal, pawn in between. And this is an en passant checkmate. What would you play in this position with black? See how the queen is being x-rayed. So if you move this pawn, you can attack the queen with the tempo. That's what black thought as well. So you move the pawn to e5. But this is a checkmate in 1. And you have 2 options. This is an en passant checkmate. And this is an en passant checkmate. Crazy! Bonjour, c'est en passant. In this position, white tried to bring in the rook into the attack. But after queen takes, there's a very important tactic you have to be aware of. Namely, rook to c8. Because if you take it, then your queen hangs. So this is a very common tactic to be aware of. But if the king goes here, then there's a checkmate in 2. Check. Brings in the pawn. Checkmate. And that's how it went. Look at this game. Look at these bishops. Well, We also have a video on how to use the bishop pair in the best way possible. Check it out here. But this is a great example of how white utilizes its bishops. After a2, the move d6, the queen has to move. Here, white puts the rook in front of the pawn, which was the best move. The knight takes and the rook takes. Black tries to win this pawn, but now the bishop comes in with a check. The king goes forward, and here the best move would have been to take the pawn, and you cannot take back because then the king comes in through g3 and it's impossible to stop a mate here. So after rook here, you go forward and you have to give away the queen for the bishop. Check. Queen d6, king g8, and now you move forward with the pawn and you cannot take it because then there's a check here. Beautiful. But white didn't see that. White went queen g3 and here queen e8 is the winning move to defend this square. Instead, black played g5, which is a mate in one. H takes g6, checkmate. Magnifique! Look at this game, a queen sack, a rook sack, everything. This is a stunning game between Magnus and John Ludwig Hammer. The hammer, hammer, hammer! This is not French. So this pawn is hanging, this pawn is being attacked, and here Hammer plays the beautiful move. I'm Mr. X. And do you like this video? Make sure to subscribe. Castles. Did you see it coming? After king g8, we slide in our rook, and here black is still better. Magnus is better. But he should have played bishop to f8. Instead, Magnus went to h7, and now this is a forced mate in 15 moves. I'm very sure you saw every single move out of the 15 moves you have to play. Well, Hammer at least saw the first move, which is knight to g5 check. The king has no escape squares, so we have to take the knight. We take it back with the h-pawn, and now the h-file is open. Putting between the bishop would have been still a mate in 13, but Magnus went for knight to h5. Hammer plays the only winning move, rook takes h5. You have to take back, and now there's a devastating check over here. The king cannot go anywhere, is in check, so you have to put something in between, which Magnus did, and then there's this beautiful checkmate. If you would have taken with this pawn, watch out, it would not have been a checkmate. This is a nice torture game as well. After rook g3, black gives a check and enters white's camp, but you can simply escape. Here the best move would have been to take the rook, because it's a lost game already, but that's not what black did. Took the pawn, and now it's a mate in 4 actually. Rook takes on g6, you take back, you have a check here. Mate in 2, king to e5. Do you see the checkmate in 2? Yes, check. Checkmate, but white wanted to go for the en passant checkmate, of course. So, after f4, king takes, white went for rook f1, the king goes back, a check on f5 is not a checkmate, because you can take it. Then you take the knight, king to d4, and now you give a check on f2, you give a check on g3, and now you have a beautiful diagonal here on g7. You have to move in between the pawn, but this is a nice checkmate. See? Because this square is covered, this square is covered. I like the aesthetics. Here black is slightly better. Black tries to open white's camp, and here white makes a crucial blunder. After g takes h4, the queen slides in, and this is a terrible looking threat. After queen a4 and the pawn in between, you give away the knight. White takes it, but there's more important stuff to do here, because after takes, after bishop h1, there's a check. We go here. Do you see the en passant checkmate in 2? Yes, this diagonal is very vulnerable. Check. You have to slide in the pawn, and this is a checkmate. Look how white finishes this game. It's already completely won. This pawn, this queen is active, the bishop is active, this bishop will be active. After bishop g5 and f6, you give a check on c7. If you go here, then you win the knight. So instead black took the pawn, then the rook comes in. This would have been deadly, just threatening checkmate on c7. But instead white decided to sack the bishop, because if you take, then the queen comes in. And here king b8 still extends the game a bit. And rook f to c3, black thought to block the access to the c-file with the knight. But here the best move is to simply take the knight. If you take it back this way, then you sacrifice the rook, And after pawn takes, this is a beautiful checkmate with en passant, of course, as a result. Instead, black took back the other way, and then we have the same checkmate pattern, checkmate. In this game, after knight e7 check, the king comes forward and white gives a check on h2. Completely lost for white. After queen h5, you take back, and this is just simply won for black with the rook against the bishop. But you can mess it up, and that's what black did. After e5, you simply should take the pawn, because this would be a check, and then you can go here. But that's what black forgot. And after rook here, there's a check, and see how well these pieces coordinate. And after the move h5, you can simply take the pawn, and the king is checkmated. ¿Qué pasa? Here white is completely crushing, because after the move d7, well, you have intermezzo move, but you take the pawn and your rook falls. +5 for white. You take back the rook, you give a threat. On this diagonal, black tries to bring in the pieces. Queen e2, and after queen g6, queen to f2 would have been the right move, attacking the knight. Queen h5 would be the right move, and now there's d6 check, king h7 and king g1. All good for white, but if you play the move rook to h1, well, then it's actually completely lost. -9 for black because of bishop to c5, taking away the escape route for the king. Yeah, and now there's some deadly tactics going on here. After d6 check, the king comes forward. After you move in the pawn, you take it back with a checkmate. And the nice thing here is that you give actually checkmate with a pawn. En passant and checkmate with a pawn. Formidable. Formidable. Look at this overwhelming position for white. Although we're in exchange down, we are in the attack. And that's what we're gonna do with b5. Going forward, black takes back, which is not the right move. Because now we take and we pin the queen to the king. And black decides to take our pawn. It is hanging, so it's an option. We take the queen, and now our pawn moves in with a check. The king comes forward. We slide in the pawn with a check. Well, you have to prevent that this pawn promotes. The king goes in front of the pawn. Queen c6. We prevent the king from going anywhere, and this bishop will join the game sooner or later. And after the move rook to a6, we give a check. You can only put this pawn in between, and that's what black does. We take it with an en passant, and this is a checkmate. Look at this game, a queen sack, a rook sack, everything. After b5, white played queen to e4, threatening checkmate. But did you see that the queen is hanging? You can simply take it. You slide in with the rook, check, and you see this discovery with the bishop. Yeah, this is deadly. So, after you take the knight, maybe you think the bishop to f6 saves the day, but that's not the case, because after rook h7 and the king goes to h8, there's another rook coming and joining the party. Rook to g1, check, the bishop has to come in between, and rook to h8 is a checkmate already, but white wanted to torture black, give a check, another check, and then takes the bishop, and after f5, this is a checkmate. Bit of weird play by white. Excusez-moi.